Hello everyone, welcome to Lily's Library, and today I'll be talking about Rooftoppers by Katherine Rundell. Now, Rooftoppers is a book that I personally really enjoyed while reading. I read this back a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed reading it due to the story and the characters, and the descriptions inside the book. The story starts in a shipwreck, where Sophie, a girl who's only 1 year old, is rescued. She is found in a floating cello case, and Charles Maxim, a scholar, picks her up from the cello case and claims her as his child. Sophie, who has lost her mother in the shipwreck, then grows up with Charles as her guardian. Charles Maxim is an amazing man who learns many languages and reads many books and lives a life being free. Well, of course, that means that he is not a suitable guardian for Sophie. At least, the government sees it that way. Sophie grows up wearing boys' clothes, climbing trees, reading a lot more books than any girl her age, and becoming an awkward and kind and free-spirited person, just like Charles. Sophie grows up with Charles teaching her the quote, "Never ignore a possible," and to believe in every possibility in the world. And of course, Sophie translates that as to saying that she should probably keep on believing the fact that her mother did not die in the shipwreck and instead is still alive out there somewhere. She proceeds to tell everyone around her that her mother is still alive and still out there, and she will find her mother. Of course, everyone around her does not believe the little girl when she says that her dead mother is still somewhere out there. They all tell Sophie, "Your mother is dead, she died in the shipwreck, and we have no idea who she was." But Sophie does not listen to the authorities. She keeps on telling everyone that she remembers her mother clearly. She tells everyone that she remembers her mother going down in the shipwreck and whistling. She tells everyone whistling is something that no one can ignore, and that her mother's whistling was very distinct. She remembers her mother being rescued. And she tells everyone that her mother was on the boat, and that she remembers her mother wearing trousers worn gray at the knee, playing the cello loudly on the boat. Now that just makes everyone feel more disbelief towards Sophie's story, since women back at the time were not allowed to play the cello or wear trousers for that matter. Now Sophie continues living with Charles in her own way, learning to play the cello and reading books and being the socially awkward but big thinker that she is. And then one day, of course, it all goes wrong. The National Child Care Agency turns up to Sophie and Charles's home and examines their living situation and comes up with the obvious results that Charles is not a suitable guardian for a girl Sophie's age, and that Sophie must be removed into the government's care. And then when they both find out that the state is going to take Sophie away, there's a big scene where Sophie gets really angry. She asks Charles, "How can I belong to the state? The state isn't a person. The state can't love anyone." The two of them are in despair, and Sophie is in panic because she doesn't want to leave Charles and she doesn't want to be the government's property. And then a miracle happens when Sophie is fiddling around with the cello case that she was found in. Sophie, while fiddling around with the cello case, finds an address inside the cello case leading to a place in Paris. She deduces that this is possibly the address that will lead to her mother, and even if it is a very small chance, she remembers Charles telling her to never ignore a possibility, even if it's very small. She and Charles leaves right away to Paris and decides to break the laws and escape from the government. Once they arrive at Paris, Sophie goes up onto the Paris rooftops and starts playing her cello. The cello is now all that she has as a hint to find her mother. The cello and the address which was written inside her mother's cello case. Sophie and Charles go to the address and find out that it's an instrument shop. The man at the shop explains that the cello was bought quite some time ago by a woman who looked just like Sophie. The man at the shop also tells Sophie that the woman who had bought the cello case played the Requiem double time at the shop because she stated that that was the only song she knew because she lived near a church, and that she wanted to make some music to dance to, but the funeral music wasn't a song that she thought people could dance to, so she was playing it double speed. Sophie felt that that was something that her mother would do, and continues in her search for her mother. One day on the rooftops, Sophie meets a boy named Matteo. He's a boy who lives on the rooftops and never goes on the ground. He calls himself a rooftopper. He says that he used to live in an orphanage where no one could laugh and no one could talk and no one could be free. He barely escaped and then swore to never go on the ground again so no one could catch him. Together, they go on to find Sophie's mother. Of course, that is after Matteo finally decides that he is going to help Sophie, and that she is a person who is worth helping. Matteo introduces Sophie to Anastasia and Safi, two girls who live in the trees, not the rooftops. The two girls live together and live in the trees, calling themselves tree dwellers. They too never really go on the ground, and survive only in the above world of the trees. These children hunt for their living, and they don't ever receive help from the people on the ground. These girls have also traded safety for their freedom, and they are happy about how they live. They would never trade the trees for anything else. And Matteo is the same about his rooftops. The rooftops are his everything, and he fights other rooftoppers for his roof because that is his home, and he tells everyone that that is his own place. Sophie is then introduced by the others to Gerard, who is a boy who lives on the top of a church. He has amazing hearing from living on top of the roof of the church and listening to people sing every single day. He helps Sophie find her mother by tracing the sound of her cello to where she is. Sophie and the Rooftoppers work together to finally find her mother in the end. Sophie goes up onto the rooftops and plays the song that her mother does, and she plays it as fast as possible, trying to hear a reply. And finally, when she thinks that it's useless, at that moment, from somewhere far away, the song starts to continue. They trace the sound to where it is, and they see a woman who looks like Sophie on one of the rooftops playing the cello. The woman obviously turns out to be Sophie's mother, and they finally get to meet happily. In the end, the entire book is a story about pursuing dreams and never ignoring a possible, even if it's just a really small possibility that a miracle will happen. Sophie follows a bunch of events which are just very small possibilities that her hope won't be just stupid and useless. She follows her dream, and she follows the small possibilities that her mother is still alive and waiting for her. And in the end, with the help of friends and the help of her own self and her own trust, she gets to meet her mother. And trusting small possibilities is not the only message that this story really conveys. It also shows how much love can affect people and how important it is. Sophie and Charles are not blood related. Charles adopted Sophie in the middle of a shipwreck, and they don't live in an ordinary or in a healthy way according to the government. However, they're happy together, and they're happy the way they are. They live together perfectly in harmony, and they do what they want. And when the government tries to take them apart with the laws, they care about each other so much that they'd rather give up their duties as citizens and listen to the law than let each other go. And they agree with each other to run away and try to find a better way to solve the problem. And this couldn't have happened if they didn't love each other and trust each other. The happy ending of the book never would have happened if Charles didn't care about Sophie enough to give her away to the government, to send her away to probably another orphanage, just like the ones where Matteo and Safi and Anastasia and all the other Rooftoppers were sent to. Without Charles and Sophie's love for each other, the story never would have had a happy ending. And I think that's another important part of the story. And last but not least, I think another message that the story tries to show is about freedom. And this one's pretty obvious. All of the Rooftoppers chose freedom over safety and the rules of an ordinary life. They all could have been children just living out in the streets. Sophie could have chose to let go of being whoever the person that she was. She could have been anyone else. She could have been an ordinary person and lived a boring life, or just given up to the government. But she didn't, and she went up to the rooftops and played the cello and waited for her mother to respond to her calls. Matteo didn't stay on the ground after he escaped from the orphanage. He ran up onto the roofs and never set a foot on land ever again, because he could survive on himself. And he could hunt, and he could create, and he could be himself on the roofs. Safi and Anastasia, or those sisters, they could have just been beggars on the street, but they say that they will never, ever be like the children who beg for money on the streets, and that they can survive by themselves in the trees because the trees are their home. All of the Rooftoppers could have just chosen a different path where everything would have been safer for them, and everything would have given them more comfort. But instead they chose to be in a place where only they could be, so they could maintain their freedom, and they could do what they wanted with their own lives. I think that shows everyone who's reading that freedom is sometimes can be more important than just comfort. Now that we're finished with the story, I'm just going to talk about a few things about the book which I personally really like. Not only are the messages in the story really beautiful, but the characters are really lovely. Like, you can't really hate any of them, despite not including the authorities, because they're naturally made in the book for the audience to hate them. They're sort of stereotypical characters. However, the other characters, the Rooftoppers, they're so creative characters, and they have their own lives. The characters move around on the roofs as if they had their own lives and if they had their own parts in the story. None of them can be seen as less important than the other. They all have their own lives, and they all have their own personalities, and I think that's a great way to write the book. Also, the writer, Katherine Rundell, says that she based this book on the experiences that she had while she was traveling in Paris, and the buildings and the rooftops that she saw there, along with the experiences that she had when she was studying at Oxford, when she would go up on the rooftops of the school when she was stressed out to relieve herself by looking at the sky and the view from up there in the rooftops. She says that this feeling of freedom up on the rooftops inspired her to write a book about children who would escape their lives onto the rooftops to have their own freedom. I actually had an opportunity to actually meet the author at an event where she explained that Sophie's mother was actually a rooftopper as well, and that's why they find her on the top of a roof at the end of the book. Maybe this had something to do with why Sophie was so free-spirited and why she always felt like herself when she was on the rooftops. And this also explains why somewhere in the middle of the book, Sophie says that the rooftops have always felt like her home. And I think that's a very interesting fact about the book. Anyways, it was really enjoyable at that event. I even got a signed copy of the book, and it was really enjoyable. We had a lot of questions and answers about the book, and I got to know a lot more about the book so I could share it with you guys. Now, before I end this video, I just wanted to point out the really first few pages of the book where the book is starting the story with Sophie being discovered in the sinking ship inside the cello case of her mother. It's a very beautiful descriptions, and according to the writer, it took so long to just get through the first page because of how detailed the descriptions was. And as a person who really likes writing and a person who enjoys writing from time to time, I just read the first part as a writer and as not as a reader but as a writer, and I think this is really, really great, and it's the beautiful descriptions are just very, very detailed. Okay, I'm rambling again, so I'm just gonna read the first sentence of the entire book so you guys can see what the description is actually like. On the morning of his first birthday, a baby was found floating in a cello case in the middle of the English Channel. It was the only living things for miles. Just the baby and some dining room chairs and the tip of a ship disappearing into the ocean. Okay, you might not think that as such beautiful descriptions as I had told you guys, but the first page is really descriptive and the rest of the book is the same. It's very detailed and very detailed and amazing when it comes to describing the characters and the settings, and this book is very relaxing to read because of that. I really recommend this book to you guys, and I hope a lot of you guys read it, and I hope you enjoy this story as much as I did if you ever get the chance to read this book. This has been Lily's Library, and thank you for listening. See you guys in the next video.